And they stopped trying to do church that way. They stopped just trying to pastor at all. And even to this day, they're just disillusioned because they had a dream, they had a passion for what could be, and they tried to do it, but it didn't work out. They just got hurt and they've given up. And you know, whenever you pursue a dream, you're taking a risk, and oftentimes you end up getting hurt. And we can just get disillusioned, going, what kind of fool am I? I'm not going to try it anymore. And walk away, and passion just kind of dies. And if these three assassins were not bad enough, there's another one, and we find this one right in church. And this last one is this warped spiritual teaching. Because you can go into, unfortunately, many churches, and either overtly or subtly, you kind of get the message that whatever really stirs you emotionally, whatever gets you worked up is an evil thing. You've got to squash that down. Because after all, God is serious. Right? God didn't joke around. And emotions and passions, all people call them passions, and they get in all sorts of trouble. You can't do that. You've got to squash emotion and squash passion, and you've got to be vigilant and responsible and do what God wants, and whatever God wants, it's got to be horrible. But you need to do it anyway, because if not, God will just be mad. And we get this idea that somehow if we follow our passions, we're following, like, I don't know, the flesh or our old nature or something evil within us. And we get that message in churches sometimes. You need to squash that because it's dangerous. God wants something else from you. And so what was so easy for us when we were kids, so easy for us when we were teenagers, passion, care, drawn, attracted, captures my imagination. This is so cool. I just want to do it. We become adults and suddenly that passion just... Because one or a combination of those assassins has kind of killed it off. Hey, are you living out of your passions? No, I'm not saying you need to quit your job and start a rock band. It's not what I'm saying. But have you discovered, have you gotten in touch, you're aware of the things that for whatever reason really, really matter to you, and if you decide you're going to arrange your life around that, and you're going to live out the passions in your heart. Because that's the only way to live a life of fulfillment or regret. You know, whenever I get in a conversation about passion, there are certain questions that always seem to come up. You know, is everybody supposed to be passionate? You know, is it just like a personality wiring thing? Some are, some aren't. Or like, how do you get passion? How do you get passion back? How do you know if the passion came from God? How do you know if it's a righteous passion that you're supposed to give yourself to? Aren't those good questions? And as I was pondering these things, I came up with a statement that I think if we just kind of dissect it and understand it, it answers most of our passion questions from a biblical point of view. And here's the statement that I would make. Righteous passions come from God. They are developed through devotion to God, and they are meant to be lived out for God. That's, I think, kind of an encapsulation, a synopsis of the Scripture's teaching on passion. Righteous passions come from God. He's the source. He's the author. But they are developed through devotion to God. And then once we have them, they are meant to be lived out for God. They are indicators of what His will for our lives really are. Righteous passions come from God. Back, 2,500 years ago, there was a man whose name was Nehemiah. And here's kind of his backstory. He was a second generation captured slave. His parents' generation, they lived back in the nation of Israel. Probably somewhere in the vicinity of the capital city, which was Jerusalem. But In essence, as we understand the story, because of their unfaithfulness to God, they ended up being conquered, and the city was ransacked, and they all got carried away as slaves to the Babylonian Empire. And somewhere while that was happening, this Nehemiah was born. And all he ever heard were stories about his homeland. Stories about what it was like when God was blessing them as a group of people. Stories about what a magnificent capital city they had. What an incredible temple where people came to worship their God. And all he did was hear stories of old, of how wonderful it was. But here he is, his second generation slave. Babylon itself then gotten conquered, and now Persia was kind of the power of the day in that corner of the world. And Nehemiah, he somehow became the cupbearer to the king. Very important position. It meant, I'm the one who tests your wine before I give it to you, so that in case somebody spiked it with a poison, I'm the one that dies, not you. So, it's a really important, the king's life depended on it. Only a very trusted person got this particular job, and that's what he was. And he lived in the palace, and he had a pretty good life, and he remembered hearing about the old stories and how wonderful things were, and began to capture his imagination. And then one day, he heard that there were some people that actually traveled back into his homeland, and had actually been in the Jerusalem area, and he sought them out. He said, "What's it like back there?" And they said, "Oh man, you wouldn't believe it. It's horrible. Because everything's ransacked. The city's in shambles. The walls, there's not one stone left on top. Everything's burnt out. It's a mess." And somehow when Nehemiah heard that, his heart was shattered. Here's what it would be like. It would be like, as an American, having the Statue of Liberty blown up and all the pieces laying on Ellis Island, and everybody just watching it and doing nothing about it. It's like, no, that's the symbol of our country. We've got to go there and rebuild, because it's a symbol of who we are and what we stand for and what we're like. And that's what it was like for Nehemiah. He said, it can't possibly be. After all these years, nobody's done anything. And it was such a source of embarrassment to him. And he said, he was devastated by that news. So devastated he couldn't hide his feelings. And one day he was bringing some wine to the king. And here's what it says in Nehemiah chapter 1. It says, when he brought the wine to the king, he could not hide the fact that he was devastated. And so the king said, "Nehemiah, why are you so sad?" Now let me tell you why this was a big deal. The Persians had a little rule. If you're a slave and you're allowed to serve on our empire, you should consider it a great honor. And if you show the slightest hint of displeasure, we will cut your head off. It's a great rule for having happy people. Be happy or die, I'm happy. That's how I really felt, right? But here Nehemiah was so devastated, so emotionally shattered by what was going on in this symbol of his country, his nation, his people, and his God, that he couldn't even hide it in front of the king. King says, "Why are you so sad?" Nehemiah's first thought is like, "Ooh, my last day on the planet. Forget 30 days to live, I got about 30 minutes. And then it says, "So I prayed to the God of heaven and then answered the king." I want a quick internal prayer. Oh God, help me. And then he said, "Here's why I'm sad." And the king must have really liked Nehemiah, because he said, "What do you want me to do?" Nehemiah goes, "Will you let me go back and rebuild?" King goes, "Okay." And then Nehemiah's thinking, rebuild with what? Rebuild with what? "Hey, would you give me letters from other, people that I passed that they need to give me supplies to rebuild with?" King goes, "Okay." And so here's Nehemiah. He takes a band of men. He travels. He goes to some, countries on his way. He says, here's an order from the king who's going to be in charge of everything. I need these supplies. He got them. He goes to the city of Jerusalem. And like on one of his first nights there, he gets up in the middle of the night and he begins to ride around the city, surveying the situation. Now get this.